everybody, I'm Jeremy Cordeux, the Court of Public Opinion. Peter Clayton is here. Peter, have you seen this? I couldn't believe this when I saw it the other day. The iconic Tupperware company warns that it will go out of business after 77 years. 77 years. Its shares having fallen 90% in a year. Now, Tupperware was, golly, it was in the culture of the country. People had Tupperware parties. If they have a problem, maybe they could get those sort of, I don't think, are they male strippers, the chipmunks? The shorts, they could come around and you could put a younger twist, if that's the word, on Tupperware parties. But I don't think you should let the whole thing slide, because if the product was good for so long, for so many, and it was so economically successful, why would you let it just go? The firm said Friday that its future was substantially doubtful. They were examining layoffs. Its shares were down 90% over a year, 50% in fact since Monday. The iconic brand Tupperware is facing extinction after its shares fell. Blah, blah, blah. Dire performance follows the filing issued by the company Friday that, as you have to do if you know your company's in trouble, you have to announce it to the stock market. So they did that, which does nothing, I would have imagined, other than speed up the whole process of your demise. 77 years. But it's a little bit like, I suspect, Avon. You know, Avon calling, ding dong. That was something that was also in the culture of the company and the country. But you don't hear anything about Avon anymore. I'd love to go through, would make a fantastic documentary, to go through these very successful companies and find out what went wrong, why did they lose their way. I always believe, whether it's a radio station, God, I've seen that, or it's Tupperware, or it's, I don't know. I always feel or suspect that it's the 12-year-old in the marketing department who tells the wiser heads how to do what they've been doing successfully for generations. But for some strange reason, people are obsessed with youth and they think, oh, well, she's 12, she must know what she's talking about. Heaven help us. It's April the 13th. Happy birthday, happy wedding anniversary. Before we get into other stuff, I mentioned it was a few days ago, it was the day of the liftoff of Apollo 13 in 1970. This is the day that crackling communication from Apollo 13 to Houston took place, which said, okay, Houston, we have a problem here. An oxygen tank explodes en route to the moon and they have to do... Anyway, you've probably seen the movie. But this was the day. The first Pony Express, hey Pete? Yes. The first Pony Express rider reaches Sacramento in California on this day in 1860. And I think it was only in existence for, was it 6 months or 18 months? Not a long time. Very short time, yet the Pony Express is in the language, it's in the culture. Not exactly like Tupperware and Avon, you understand, but you see what I mean. Don Adams, American comedian, Emmy Award-winning actor, Get Smart, Tennessee Tuxedo, The Bill Dana Show. Oh, he was so clever. So clever. Born in New York City. He died in 2005. He was born this day in 1923. When I was doing Blind Date nationally for the 10 network, they had him on 7 up against me. And I knew I was a cooked goose because I thought to myself, well, if I was at home would I be watching Blind Date or would I be watching Get Smart? I would have been watching Get Smart. Anyway, I like Don Adams. Missed it by that much. So clever. You can't write that stuff. That all came from his inspirational interpretation of the character. Yes. Would you believe was another part of it, wasn't it? Sorry? If he said something, and he said, 13 men, somebody had a gun to his head or something, and he'd say, I have 1,500 Secret Service men coming through that door in 10 seconds. Nothing happened, and he would say, would you believe 10 Secret Service? So funny. So funny. The first elephant arrives in the United States of America from India. 1796. Poor elephant. Why do you leave him at home? Robert Watson Watt, Scottish physicist and developer of the radar and radio directional finder in World War II, is born in Scotland. He died in 1973, but he was born this day in 1892. Well, that was a hell of a thing to have in the war, that you actually had radar. By golly, that would have been an advantage. Guy Fawkes, the English Catholic conspirator who was convicted of the gunpowder plot. That was the plot to blow up federal parliament. Guy Fawkes, where are you now that we need you? He was born on this day in 1570. He died in 1606. I think they cut his head off from memory. The best view of Halley's Comet in 2,000 years. 837. How would they know? How would they know back in 1837 what was a good view or a bad view? Pan Am places $525 million order for 25 Boeing 747 aircraft on this day in 1966. Now, of course, along with Tupperware and Avon, Pan Am isn't around anymore. I'd like to check that one out as well. I tell you, that's the 12-year-old in the marketing department. That's the one. US record producer Phil Spector is found guilty of second-degree murder of actress Lana Clarkson in 2003. That was 2009. He was found guilty. Butch Cassidy, the American desperado, Wild Bunch Passage, born in Beaver, Utah, died in 1908, born 1866. And if you remember the day for any reason, a couple of the highlights in my book anyway. Hope it'll be a good day wherever you are going, whoever you are, wherever you are. And you could be absolutely anywhere, because this amazing podcast that we have now, we are on Facebook and we broadcast, and you can see from where we broadcast and how we broadcast. But now that there's a podcast out there, all you have to do is to say, hey Google, or whatever your method of finding podcasts happens to be, and you just say Jeremy Cordeux's Court of Public Opinion, and it's there. But you get the audio, not the video. But so it's a brave new world, ladies and gentlemen, one I find myself in awe of. Lead story on the Channel 9 News on Monday night was this one: football star vilified over his colour. This bloke, who's a big, tough guy, good footballer, paid $1 million a year or more. Then, of course, you've got endorsements and whatnot. Somebody on social media, apparently, said something to him about his skin colour. I couldn't see anything particularly notable about his skin colour. I don't know or care what his skin colour happens to be. It's obviously a very thin skin, regardless of the colour. Honestly, when I went to school, people would call me a frog, and worse, but frog because I had a French surname. And I remember there was a German kid in the class, and they used to call him Squarehead, and Nazi, and all sorts of terrible things. People do that kind of thing, particularly kids. We understood that what people say, really, in that sense, context, doesn't mean anything. If you're a blonde, and people tend to tell blonde jokes, and they think if you're blonde, you're dumb, what is somebody going to say about you because you're black or brown? What the hell does that matter? People risk their lives to get a suntan. Go figure. Nothing wrong with being black or brown. This shouldn't make the lead story in the national news. I'm sorry. I think this is just feeding a very nasty thing in society. World's gone crazy. Here's a thought, though, not only to that particular football player, but anybody. Don't look at social media. It's filled with maliciousness and nonsense and crap. Everything except, of course, this program, the Court of Public Opinion, where hopefully, thanks to me and Pete, we'll always give you common sense. A prejudiced view, I will admit. A Save the Children commercial running on the media today and every day said something like this: "We fear that if we don't do something, 25 million children will die in Yemen." This is the war in Yemen, civil war. We need your donation to save these children. It's filled with pictures that are designed to make us aware of this terrible, terrible suffering. I get it. I don't doubt that there is a lot of pain going on there, but a better and faster approach would be to immediately get the Save the Children Fund to lobby, beg, force, whatever you can do, the United Nations to put together a peacekeeping force immediately for deployment in Yemen. That would be a practical thing to do. You see, this is a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's all it is. Nothing to do with anyone else. You need to talk to the people who are causing the problem. Can I spell it out to you? Iran and Saudi Arabia. That is where the ads should be running, not Australia. Or I have no doubt they're being run in Europe, America, England, everywhere. Doctors say they can no longer continue under the present Medicare arrangements. You would have seen this story, I'm sure. The problem seems to be that bulk billing is no longer affordable. Can't do it. Which, of course, was the great incentive for us to agree to the Medicare legislation in the first place. That is, that we would pay nothing at the doctor's surgery. The doctors say that is not possible anymore. So could I suggest, in all humility, to the government that paying the Medicare levy on our tax every week or every month or every year or however you pay it is also null and void? You made a deal, Prime Minister. Well, not necessarily this one, but certainly Whitlam and Hawke. You made a deal. Free health care in exchange for everyone paying a Medicare levy. And in fact, if you are not paying another levy, which is your private health insurance levy, you are hit even more. Well, the government has failed to live up to their end of the bargain. What are you going to do about it? I get it. I get it. You reckon the AMA and the doctors, everybody else, and the media, they reckon no one will remember the Medicare levy and the deal that was done. Well, I remember, and I will keep reminding people in the court of public opinion, you can't. You do a deal, you stick to it. You can't just renege on it. The Libs are out of the closet. They have announced that they will not support The Voice. You would have caught up with this. They will not support The Voice, but that does not include their shadow Attorney General, Julian Lesser. I would have sacked him. You know, I would have sacked him, because nobody can be that stupid, really. No one with half a brain would support The Voice. Can you imagine 3% of the population making demands of the majority in a democracy? This is so absurd as to be silly. Now, this is the government that we elected. Yet, if you're going to have a voice for Aboriginal people, 3% of the population, aren't you going to have a voice for the disabled, the refugees, migrants, homosexuals, vegans, cyclists, methylated spiritualists? No, that'd be less than 3%, I think. Surely a voice for women, a separate voice for women. 50% of the population, women. Now that could be a good idea. Look, Aboriginal people have 11 representatives in Parliament. That's over 5% of the number of people in Parliament. 5% in Parliament, yet only 3% in the population. That is what you call over-representation, I think. Has anybody pointed that out? I haven't heard it. What's wrong with the status quo? What's the real problem they're trying to fix? The Prime Minister says, if not now, when? Well, sir, I have a better question. Why? Why? Listening to Noel Peterson just before Easter, fine man, fine Aboriginal leader, he talks about the Judas betrayal of Australia by Peter Dutton. Look, I have spoken to Noel Peterson many times, but all the hyperbole and all of the campaigning by the ABC will not force Australia to do something as dangerous as this voice thing. It's a watershed moment. It's a watershed moment in the history of this country. Frankly, I call on the ABC, speaking of them, I call on the management of the ABC to resign. In all seriousness, I have never seen such political interference, campaigning and lack of objectivity from a broadcaster in my 60 years in the media. I think they're a disgrace. At least if they're going to go on like this, let them issue a disclaimer. Just say openly, we are campaigning for a yes vote at the referendum. Now that's integrity. You know what integrity is, don't you? Aboriginal people are not stupid. They will wake up and they'll ask the fundamental question, where is the money? Where is the money? Where do the billions and billions and billions of dollars that are given, allocated to Aboriginal people, where do they actually go? When that happens, Prime Minister, that will be a moment of real awakening. I look forward to that. And Prime Minister, if all of this is about Aboriginal recognition in the Constitution, if you want to look it up, it's there. Section 51(26). Look it up, it's there. And just before I leave you, on more or less the same subject, I heard Fred Chaney, the former Liberal Aboriginal Affairs Minister, beating Peter Dutton over the head, extolling the virtues he was of The Voice on, of course, the ABC. He wouldn't have been spoken to, I suspect, had he not been pro The Voice. He said it was a Liberal scare campaign. The Liberals were trying to resurrect what they did with the Mabo land rights issue all those years ago, when there was a campaign that talked about people losing their backyards. I remember. And really, most land, in truth, would be contestable under Mabo. But again, he described it as a scare campaign. Can I remind you that because of Mabo, it really is because of Mabo, 50% of this country is now owned by Aboriginal people. And the 15,000 square kilometres in Central Australia that was given to Aboriginal people just the other day, that means they now have a shade over 51% of the entire country. They didn't buy it, they have been given it, or they have legal title to it. But are they happy? Are they happy? No, clearly not. What have they done with their more than 50% of the country? What progress have they made with it? Now, whether that whole Mabo thing affected your backyard or not, I don't know. Was it a scare campaign? Back there in the 1970s, if you would have said to the people of Australia, Mabo will result in half the country being given to Aboriginal people, would you have agreed to that? Would you? Would you have agreed? Would you have thought it was a good idea? I think it was probably a pretty accurate assessment, mind you. Maybe you didn't lose your backyard, but clearly a lot of people did. Half of this country is now black, half of it is white. The only difference, of course, being that white people had to buy their property. Aboriginals were given their property, and that privilege was based on nothing more than the colour of their skin, which I remind you, again, is racism, which I'm pretty sure you and I would want nothing to do with. Thanks for viewing the Court of Public Opinion. We'll be back to round up the week tomorrow. Believe in yourself. I'm Jeremy Cordeux, and goodbye for now.